Millionaire caught his children surprising the neighbor asking for food. And the reason was, if this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching from. Let's begin. On a muggy Wednesday afternoon, Robert Alden returned to the United Kingdom after 3 weeks of international meetings. The environmental technology entrepreneur was known for his efficiency, his growing fortune, and for being one of the most influential figures in the renewable energy market in Europe. As he entered the gated community in Chelsea, London, all he wanted was to get home, hug his 7-year-old twin children, Matthew and Beatrice, and for a moment forget the exhaustion of the demanding negotiations. The electronic gate of the mansion slowly opened, revealing the meticulously trimmed garden, the mirrored windows reflecting the grey sky, and the usual silence of a luxury home. Robert parked, and before he even took his briefcase from the boot, a movement in the neighbouring house caught his attention. 2 small figures stood at the door of Mrs. Clara's residence. The retired woman who had lived there alone for years. With his heart pounding, Robert recognized his children, barefoot in worn clothes, their faces marked by what appeared to be fatigue and hunger. The image made no sense. His children, raised in a home with every possible comfort, were asking for food from the neighbor. The elderly woman, with her white hair tied in a bun and a dishcloth in her hands, welcomed them with a look of silent compassion. Robert approached, overcome by an uneasiness that would soon turn into despair. "Mrs. Clara, what's going on?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he watched his children hide behind the elderly woman. "Oh, Mr. Alden, thank goodness you're back," the woman said, with evident relief in her eyes. "These children, they've been showing up here. I don't quite know how to explain it." Matthew and Beatrice remained quiet, looking at the floor, as if fearing something. Robert knelt, opening his arms. "My little ones, Daddy's back. Come here." The children hesitated, exchanged glances, until Beatrice, always the braver one, took a step forward. "Mummy can't know," she whispered, her blue eyes wide with fear. "She'll be angry if she knows we're here." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. Something in his daughter's tone, in the genuine fear in her childish voice, set off an alarm in his mind. He looked at Mrs. Clara, who returned his gaze with a worried expression. "Why don't we all come inside to talk?" the neighbor suggested, opening the door wider. "I made a fresh cornmeal cake." Inside the simple and welcoming home, while the children devoured generous slices of cake with disturbing eagerness, Robert and Mrs. Clara spoke in low voices in the kitchen. The elderly woman, hesitant at first, began to recount what she had been observing in recent weeks. "Mr. Alden, I didn't want to meddle in family matters, but—" She twisted the dishcloth between her wrinkled fingers. "These children started appearing here about 2 weeks ago. First it was just Matthew, asking for a glass of water. Then he came back with his sister, asking if I had a roll. I asked about their mother, and the boy said she was busy with her friends." Robert listened attentively, feeling a mix of confusion and growing concern. "Yesterday," Mrs. Clara continued, "they appeared late in the afternoon. Beatrice was crying, saying they had been hungry since breakfast. I gave them some soup I had made, and they ate as if they hadn't seen food in days, Mr. Alden." "But that's impossible," Robert murmured, running a hand through his hair. "We have staff. A house full of food. How can—" "I can't explain it. But something isn't right. I tried to speak to your wife once, when I saw her leaving all dressed up for some event. She treated me as if I were crazy, said the children had behavioral problems and that I shouldn't feed them outside of mealtimes." The elderly woman lowered her voice even further. "And there's more. Sometimes I hear shouting. Your house is big. But the sound travels across the garden at night." Robert looked into the living room, where Matthew and Beatrice were now drinking chocolate milk, sitting together on the sofa, as if one could protect the other. The boy had deep, dark circles under his eyes that Robert didn't remember seeing before. Beatrice, and always so talkative and expansive, seemed withdrawn, almost frightened. How had he not noticed before? How many trips had he made in recent months? Trusting that Lucy, his wife, would care for their children with the same love and dedication as he. "Thank you for looking after them, Mrs. Clara," Robert said, squeezing the elderly woman's hand. "I'll sort this out." "Be careful," she replied, with a wisdom only years could bring. Your wife, she has a way of convincing people. I tried to talk to other neighbors about what I saw, but everyone thinks she's a perfect mother. With those charity events and magazine appearances. Robert nodded, understanding perfectly. Lucy Alden was known in London social circles as the dedicated wife of the successful entrepreneur, always impeccable, organizing charity galas and talking about motherhood on national TV shows. The perfect image, the ideal complement to his own career. But now, looking at his children with different eyes, he wondered how much of that image was real. Upon returning home, Lucy greeted them in the entrance hall, as beautiful as ever in her designer dress, but with a calculated coldness in her gaze that Robert couldn't decipher. "Where were you?" she asked, ignoring her husband and fixing her eyes on the children. "With me," Robert replied, stepping between her and the children. "I took them out for a walk. I missed them." Something in Lucy's gaze shifted, as if a switch had been flicked. Her smile broadened, radiant and rehearsed. "How wonderful, darling," she exclaimed, hugging him with exaggerated enthusiasm. "We missed you terribly too, didn't we, children?" Matthew and Beatrice didn't respond, only moved closer to their father, clinging to his legs as if seeking protection. "They're a little tired," Lucy continued, without losing her smile. "I think it was too hectic a day. Shall we go upstairs for a bath?" "I'll take them," Robert said firmly. "I want to spend time with them." A flash of irritation crossed Lucy's perfect face, so quick it would have been imperceptible to anyone who didn't know her well. But Robert knew, and that sign made him even more alert. "As you wish," she replied, shrugging. "I'll call Christine. We need to finalize the details for next week's charity dinner." As he ascended the stairs with his children, Robert felt the weight of his discovery on his shoulders. What was truly happening in his home when he wasn't there? What else did he need to uncover? And most importantly, how would he protect Matthew and Beatrice from a threat he never imagined could exist within his own home? In the following days, acting with extreme caution, Robert took his children to a private pediatric clinic in Kensington. He managed to get a discreet appointment with Dr. Teresa Shaw, a renowned and completely trustworthy doctor. He invented an excuse for Lucy, saying he would take the children to the shopping centre, buying them ice cream and gifts so they wouldn't reveal the true purpose of their outing. "Daddy, why are we going to the doctor?" Beatrice asked from the back seat of the car, clutching the new teddy bear Robert had bought minutes earlier. "It's just a routine checkup, Princess, to see if you're growing strong and healthy." Matthew, always quieter and more observant, looked out the window with an expression too serious for a 7-year-old. "Will Mummy find out?" he asked, so softly that Robert barely heard him. "No, son. It'll be our secret for now, okay?" At the clinic, Dr. Teresa received them in her child-friendly decorated office, but her professional gaze quickly picked up worrying signs in the children. After detailed examinations and a private conversation with each of the twins, she asked to speak with Robert in her office. While a nurse stayed with Matthew and Beatrice, "Mr. Alden," she began, with a grave expression, "I need to be direct. Your children show clear signs of mild malnutrition, anemia, and what appears to be prolonged chronic stress." Robert felt as if he had been punched in the stomach, even though he had already suspected something like this. "Furthermore," the doctor continued, "I found old bruises on Matthew's back that are not consistent with accidental falls. Beatrice has a quite pronounced anxiety disorder for her age." "My God," Robert murmured, covering his face with his hands. When questioned about their routine at home, both showed great fear. Matthew even trembled when I asked about his mother. The doctor leaned forward in her chair with a serious expression. "Mr. Alden, as a doctor, I am obligated to report suspected cases of neglect. But before taking that step, I would like to better understand the situation. Were you aware of these signs?" Robert explained what he had discovered in recent days since his return from his trip. The doctor listened attentively, taking notes. "I suggest you document everything from now on," she said, handing Robert a detailed medical report, photos, videos, testimonies, behavioral records. "If you need help protecting these children, you will need concrete evidence, especially considering your wife's social standing." Leaving the clinic, with the report tucked into his jacket and the children re-energized after receiving more gifts from the toy store, Robert made a crucial call. Charles Miller had been his lawyer for over a decade, a family law specialist and a personal friend. If there was anyone who could help him in this delicate situation, it was him. "Charles, I need to see you urgently. It's about my children." "Has something serious happened, Robert?" "Yes, but I can't talk about it over the phone. Can we meet at your office tonight?" "Of course. Is 8 p.m. good? I'll be alone, no secretaries." "Perfect." And Charles. Total discretion. That night, after putting the twins to bed, something he hadn't done in a long time, but which now seemed vital, Robert told Lucy he needed to sort out pending business from his trip and left. In the luxurious law office in central London, Charles awaited him with a bottle of whiskey and the experience of someone who had seen many family dramas unfold. "My friend," Charles said, after hearing Robert's full account, "what you are describing is extremely serious: child neglect, possibly psychological abuse, and being perpetrated by a respected public figure with an impeccable image." "What should I do?" Robert asked, feeling more lost than ever. "First, no direct confrontations. If Lucy suspects you've discovered something, she might change her behavior or worse, use her influence to get ahead and create a narrative against you." Charles walked to his desk and picked up a card. "This is Paul Rivers, a former Metropolitan Police officer and now a private investigator. He's discreet, professional, and a specialist in family cases. Hire him to document everything." "Do you think we need to go that far?" "Robert," Charles said seriously, "I've known you for many years and I know you're not one to exaggerate. If you're concerned, and if a respected doctor like Dr. Teresa has already documented physical signs, then yes, we need a professional investigation. We're not just talking about gaining custody of your children. We're talking about protecting them from further harm." The next day, Paul Rivers, a middle-aged man with a discreet appearance and shrewd eyes, met Robert at a secluded cafe in Chelsea. After hearing the details, he got straight to the point. "We need concrete and irrefutable evidence. In these cases, a child's word is rarely enough against that of an influential mother. I suggest we install discrete cameras at strategic points in the house, the children's room, the kitchen, and common areas." "Is that legal?" Robert asked, concerned. "In your own residence, yes, especially considering the objective is to protect minors in a possible situation of risk. But we cannot install them in bathrooms or the master bedroom." Robert agreed to the plan. Paul would provide modern and discreet equipment, which would be installed by technicians disguised as an air conditioning maintenance team. It was crucial that Lucy suspected nothing. As preparations advanced, Robert kept a close watch on his wife's behavior with the children. What he saw confirmed his suspicions. Lucy was cold and distant when she believed she was alone with the children, but transformed into the perfect mother when she noticed his presence or that of any other witness. The twins, in turn, seemed to walk on eggshells around her, measuring every word, every gesture. On a particularly revealing morning, Robert pretended to leave for the office, but silently returned minutes later, using the service entrance. From the hallway leading to the kitchen, he heard Lucy's sharp voice. "How many times do I have to repeat that I don't want noise in this house?" she said, in a cold tone Robert had never heard before. "Your father might find your nonsense amusing, but I have no patience for it. Now go to your room and stay there until lunch." "But Mummy, we're hungry." Beatrice's timid voice sounded almost inaudible. The sound of something hitting the table made Robert flinch. "I said breakfast is over. If you had woken up on time, you would have eaten. Now it's too late." Robert needed all his willpower not to enter the kitchen and confront Lucy at that instant, but he knew that doing so could compromise the entire plan. Silently, he left the house and went to the office, where he spent the entire day thinking about his children, imagining how many mornings like that they had already lived without him knowing. The following week, with the cameras already installed and working, Robert watched the recordings daily on the laptop Paul had given him. What he saw horrified him more and more. Lucy screamed at the children for insignificant reasons, locked them in their room for hours, drastically limited their food under the pretext of food discipline, and made constant threats mentioning what would happen if Daddy knew what you're really like. In one of the most disturbing recordings, Matthew appeared with his face marked by fingers, an evident slap, while Lucy adjusted her own makeup, calmly saying, "If your father asks, you say you bumped your face on the cupboard door. Understood? And stop crying." That's what spoiled children do. Meanwhile, Paul investigated Lucy's past and recent activities. He discovered a worrying pattern. Former household staff had been abruptly dismissed or left without clear explanations. The previous nanny, Frances, now worked for another family in South London. When Paul discreetly interviewed her, she confirmed his suspicions. "I left because I couldn't bear to see it," Frances confessed, still visibly shaken. "Mrs. Lucy has two faces. In front of Mr. Robert or her friends, she's all affectionate. When she's alone with the children—" She shook her head. "I tried to talk to her once, to say that the children needed more attention, more affection. I was fired the next day, with threats that I would never work for any respectable family again if I told anyone." The family driver, Joseph, also had disturbing stories to tell. The boy, Matthew, got sick several times in the car after school. Once I asked if he had eaten lunch, and he said his mother didn't let him because he had been naughty that morning. When I mentioned something to Mrs. Lucy, she said I was making things up and threatened to dismiss me. Robert meticulously gathered all this evidence, strictly following Charles's instructions. With each passing day, he felt more urgency to act, but he knew he needed to be strategic to definitively protect his children. Meanwhile, the couple's social life continued, seemingly normally. Lucy organized her traditional annual charity dinner for a foundation supporting underprivileged children. The irony did not escape Robert, and the London press celebrated her as an example of a dedicated mother and tireless philanthropist. At home, however, the atmosphere was increasingly tense. Robert invented excuses to always be present, cancelled appointments to be with his children, and noticed that this was beginning to deeply bother Lucy. "You never cared so much before," she commented one night, as Robert read stories to the twins at bedtime. "I guess I realized how much I'm missing out on their childhood," he replied, without looking directly at his wife. "They grow up so fast." Lucy observed the scene for a few moments, her face an impenetrable mask, before retreating to her room without saying another word. Robert knew she suspected something, but he continued his plan meticulously. After a month of investigation, Robert had a complete dossier in hand. Videos, testimonies, medical and psychological reports, all documenting a clear pattern of neglect and psychological abuse. With this material, Charles filed an urgent request for a protective order and provisional custody of the twins, under judicial secrecy. What Robert didn't expect was Lucy's reaction. Somehow, perhaps through contacts in the justice system, perhaps through a bribed employee, she found out about the process even before being officially notified. Her counter-offensive was immediate and brutal. The morning after the process was filed, Robert woke up to his phone exploding with notifications. An article on a well-known gossip website spoke of a crisis in entrepreneur Robert Alden's marriage and insinuated that he was suffering from emotional instability and paranoia caused by stress. Friends called asking if everything was all right, if he needed help. At breakfast, Lucy appeared impeccable as always, but with a dangerous glint in her eye. "Any problems, dear?" she asked with false sweetness. "You seem tense." "Nothing important," Robert replied, remaining calm. "Just some work issues." "What a shame." She poured herself coffee. "I heard some people are worried about you. They say you've been acting strange, obsessive with the children. Even your mother called me asking if you're well." The message was clear. She was building a narrative against him. The next step would be obvious, to portray him as an unstable, potentially dangerous husband, using his own concern for his children as evidence of imbalance. Robert smiled calmly, refusing to fall into the trap. "Funny how people make up stories, isn't it?" He stood up from the table. "I'm taking the children to school today." "It's not necessary. The driver can—" "I insist." When he left with the twins, Robert breathed a sigh of relief. The war was declared, but he had something Lucy didn't expect: concrete and irrefutable proof of her actions. In the car, he called Charles. "She already knows." "I imagined that might happen," the lawyer replied. "Has she started to counterattack?" "Yes, planting stories about my supposed imbalance. Classic. Will accelerate the process. Judge Claudia Mason has taken the case, and she's known for prioritizing the welfare of children above all else. We have a hearing scheduled for tomorrow. Urgent and confidential. That fast. The evidence we presented is very strong, Robert, and considering the possibility of retaliation against the children, the judge understood the urgency. The next day, at the Central London courthouse, Robert and Charles waited in the hearing room when Lucy entered, accompanied by two renowned lawyers. She was stunning in a discreet and elegant navy blue suit, the perfect image of the wronged wife. Her gaze met Robert's, cold as ice. Judge Claudia Mason was a middle-aged woman with a severe expression and shrewd eyes. After the initial formalities, she went straight to the point. This is a preliminary hearing to assess the need for urgent protective measures in favor of the minors Matthew and Beatrice Alden. She looked at both parties. Before we proceed, I would like to make it clear that my only concern here is the welfare of these children. Charles presented Robert's case first, showing carefully selected excerpts from the recordings, medical reports, and testimonies. As the evidence was presented, Lucy's face remained impassive, but her fingers tightened on the edge of the table with increasing force. When it was her turn, Lucy cried discreetly, presenting herself as a victim of a controlling and manipulative husband. Her lawyers argued that the recordings were illegal, that the employees' testimonies were motivated by revenge after justified dismissals, and that the children were being alienated by their father. Your Honor, one of Lucy's lawyers said, Mr. Robert Alden has always been an absent father, focused on his career. Now suddenly, he develops this obsession with his children, recording the house without consent, manipulating former employees, all while showing clear signs of emotional instability. The judge listened to both sides carefully, making occasional notes. At the end of the presentations, she announced, I will make a preliminary decision, but first I order an immediate inspection of the family residence with the presence of social workers and child protection officers. She looked directly at Lucy. Are you aware of this hearing? Lucy hesitated for a moment. Not officially, Your Honor, but I heard rumors. I see. The judge made another note. The inspection will be carried out immediately, without prior notice. Where are the children at this moment? At school, Robert replied. They finish at 5:30 p.m. Then the inspection will happen at 5 p.m. Both parties are prohibited from contacting the residents until then. She struck her gavel. This hearing is adjourned and will resume tomorrow at 10 a.m. after the inspection report. Leaving the courthouse, Robert felt anxious, but hopeful. He knew the house would be impeccable, Lucy always ensured that, but he also knew that the cameras were still working. If the inspection found something, anything that confirmed his allegations, it would be a crucial step towards protecting his children. What he didn't expect was the call he received from Paul Rivers a few hours later. Mr. Alden, I think we need to talk. Something happened at your house today, and the cameras captured everything. Robert's heart froze. Are the children all right? Yes, they're still at school, but your wife, she just gave orders to lock their room as soon as they get back. It seems she found out about the inspection. Robert felt a wave of relief followed by steely determination. Perhaps, finally, Lucy had made a mistake she couldn't explain. At 5 p.m. sharp, the inspection team arrived at the Alden mansion. Lucy was not at home as per judicial order, but the housekeeper opened the doors for the officers. The house was impeccable, as expected. However, when they reached the first floor and tried to open the twins' bedroom door, they found it locked from the outside. Why is this room locked? The social worker asked the housekeeper. I don't know, madam. The woman seemed genuinely confused. The mistress asked me to leave it like this today, said the children were being punished. Punished? For what? I can't explain. Mrs. Lucy just instructed me not to open it until she arrived. The key was requested, and when the door opened, the team found a perfectly tidy children's room, but with disturbing details. The windows were sealed with tape. There were only water bottles and a few biscuits on the table, and all toys were stored in locked boxes. This is very strange, commented the child protection officer, photographing everything. It looks like a punishment environment, not a child's room. The inspection continued, and more details emerged. In the kitchen, the refrigerator had a lock installed. In Lucy's office, records of consultations with nutritionists prescribing restrictive diets for the children, supposedly for behavior control, as were found, and, most alarmingly, a diary where she detailed punishments applied to the twins, including food deprivation. When the inspection report was presented at the hearing the next day, Judge Claudia Mason did not hesitate. She granted provisional custody of the twins to Robert and ruled that Lucy could only see them in supervised visits until a complete psychological evaluation was carried out. The evidence presented, the judge declared, indicates a worrying pattern of behavior that puts the physical and emotional well-being of the children at risk. The priority now is to ensure their safety while the process takes its course. Lucy, who until then had maintained her composure, lost control upon hearing the decision. "This is absurd," she shouted, standing up. "He manipulated everything. He set this whole situation up. Don't you understand what he's capable of?" "Mrs. Alden," the judge interrupted severely, "control yourself or you will be removed from the court." Lucy's lawyers tried to calm her, but she continued, becoming increasingly agitated. "Robert always wanted to destroy me. He's jealous of my success. My public image. These children are mine. I raised them while he traveled the world. Remove the lady from the room," the judge ordered, and the bailiffs approached Lucy, who continued shouting accusations as she was escorted out. At the end of the hearing, Robert was authorized to pick up his children from school and take them home, but he was advised to find a new temporary place for them to live, away from the Chelsea mansion and the painful memories it now represented. That same afternoon, as Matthew and Beatrice slept exhausted in their hotel suite where they would stay for the next few days, Robert looked out the window at the London Eye in the distance and felt a mixture of relief and sadness. How had he reached that point? How had he not noticed the signs? And, most importantly, how would he rebuild his children's lives from there? The answer began to take shape in his mind. A house in Windsor, in the fresh countryside air, away from the hustle and bustle of the big city and the gossip of London high society. A new beginning for all of them. And, perhaps more importantly, the creation of a foundation dedicated to identifying and combating veiled child neglect in high-income families, a type of abuse often ignored by society, hidden behind facades of perfection and privilege. As he planned the next steps, Robert received a message from Charles. "I just learned that Lucy gave a bombshell interview to a celebrity magazine, claiming you are abusive and using your power and money to take her children away. Get ready, the war has only just begun." Robert looked at his sleeping children, so small and vulnerable, finally breathing without the weight of constant fear. For them, he would face any battle, any media storm, any accusation. The truth was documented, and justice, slow but relentless, would take its course. The next morning, waking up to Matthew and Beatrice jumping on his bed, genuinely smiling for the first time in a long time, Robert knew he had made the right choice. The road would be long and difficult, but the most important thing was already secured. His children were safe. As he prepared breakfast for the three of them, with the twins eagerly helping to set the table, Robert thought of all the other children who might be living in similar situations, in impeccable mansions with perfect gardens and seemingly exemplary parents. How many other Matthews and Beatrices existed, suffering in silence, their voices stifled by privilege and appearances? His foundation, which was already beginning to take shape in his mind, would be his way of transforming that painful experience into something positive. Voices of Silence. Perhaps that would be the name. A place where children like his could be heard, where parents like him could find guidance, and where society could learn to see beyond appearances. As the twins laughed, trying to make pancakes and spilling flour everywhere, Robert smiled. Recovery would be a process, not an event, but it had already begun. The following months were intense for the Alden family. Settled in a cozy house in Windsor, Robert dedicated himself fully to rebuilding his children's emotional well-being. The property, less luxurious than the Chelsea mansion, had a large garden where the children could run freely, a dog named Tobias, who quickly became the twins' inseparable companion, and an atmosphere of tranquility that contrasted with the tension they had lived with for so long. Matthew and Beatrice were enrolled in a local school, small and welcoming, where the head teacher, discreetly informed of the situation, ensured special attention to the siblings' adaptation. Dr. Raymond Davies, a child psychologist recommended by the court, visited them 3 times a week, helping the children process their experiences through play and art therapy. "How are they progressing?" Robert asked the specialist after another session, while the twins played in the garden with Tobias. "Better than I expected, considering everything," Dr. Raymond replied, observing the children through the window. "Matthew still has episodes of food-related anxiety. Notice how he always keeps a piece of his snack in his pocket. It's a self-preservation behavior, common in children who have experienced food insecurity." Robert nodded, his heart aching. He had already noticed this habit of his son. "And Beatrice? She processes trauma differently. She's more talkative, more expressive, which is positive. But she also has frequent nightmares." The psychologist adjusted his glasses. "The most important thing now is consistency, Robert. Predictable routines, healthy boundaries, and constant demonstrations of affection. These children need to relearn to trust." While the twins' emotional recovery slowly progressed, the legal battle with Lucy became increasingly public and fierce. As Charles had predicted, she used all her media influence to build a victim narrative. Exclusive interviews, appearances on TV shows, and emotional social media posts portrayed her as a dedicated mother, unfairly separated from her children by a powerful and vindictive husband. "I can't believe people are buying this story," Robert confided, flipping through a magazine that featured Lucy on the cover, crying dramatically under the headline, "A Mother's Drama. I want my children back." "People love a story of injustice, especially when it involves a beautiful and famous woman," commented Paul Rivers, who continued to work on the case, now focused on monitoring Lucy's actions and her associates. "But justice isn't made in magazines, Robert. It's made in court, with concrete evidence, and in that arena we have the advantage." Charles Miller agreed. In his office, meeting with Robert, he methodically organized the evidence for the next phase of the process. "Lucy's attempts to manipulate public opinion may generate temporary sympathy, but they are starting to backfire," the lawyer explained. The judge was not at all pleased with the interviews, considering them an attempt to pressure the court externally, and Lucy's psychological evaluations are not going well. "What do you mean?" The forensic psychologist appointed by the court detected worrying signs: pathological narcissism, manipulative behavior, lack of genuine empathy. Charles flipped through a preliminary report. "Of course, these are not definitive diagnoses, but they strengthen our argument about the emotionally abusive environment she created for the children." The next hearing was scheduled for the following month, when the provisional custody would be re-evaluated. Robert knew that Lucy was preparing an even more aggressive offensive, and his lawyers warned of the possibility of new, increasingly serious accusations. "She's getting desperate," Charles commented. "That makes her dangerous, but also more prone to making mistakes." The mistake came sooner than expected. In a live interview for a high-audience program, pressured by the interviewer about inconsistencies in her account, Lucy lost control. "You don't understand. Those children needed discipline. Robert always spoiled them too much, ruined them with gifts and permissiveness. Someone needed to set boundaries." The interviewer, sensing the tension, delved deeper into the question, "What kind of boundaries, Lucy?" "Normal boundaries, meal times, playtimes, consequences for bad behavior. What mother has never left a child without dessert for being naughty? What mother has never sent a child to their room as punishment?" "But the medical reports mention mild malnutrition." Lucy's face hardened. "That's an exaggeration. The children have always been thin. It's genetic. That doctor was bought by Robert, like all the others. I'm the victim here." The interview went viral on social media. The shift in narrative from "I never neglected my children" to "discipline is necessary" did not go unnoticed. Commentators began questioning the inconsistencies, and former friends from the couple's social circle, previously silent, began to speak out. Christine Vance, formerly a close friend of Lucy and Beatrice's godmother, sought out Charles to give a formal statement. In her declaration, she revealed, I always found it strange how the children never participated in the family's social events. When questioned, Lucy would say they were with the nanny or sick or in educational activities. Once, I went to the mansion without warning and found the twins locked in their room while Lucy was preparing for a charity event. She explained they were being punished for breaking a very expensive vase. At the time, I believed her. Other similar testimonies began to emerge. A waiter who had worked at events at the Alden mansion remembered seeing Matthew taking leftover food from the kitchen late at night during a party. The children's previous pediatrician admitted that he had noticed weight loss in consecutive consultations, but had accepted Lucy's explanations about healthy diets recommended by renowned nutritionists. As Lucy's public image began to deteriorate, her strategy became even more desperate and dangerous. On a rainy afternoon, while Robert worked in his makeshift office at the Windsor house, he received an alarming call from Charles. "Lucy has filed a formal complaint against you. She's accusing you of physical abuse against her during your marriage." Robert felt his blood run cold. "That's completely absurd. I would never—" I know. But she presented photos of bruises, medical reports dated years ago, and even a witness, her secretary, who claims to have seen Mark several times. How can she invent something like that? Unfortunately, it's a tactic we see frequently in custody disputes. Charles's voice sounded tired. She's playing hardball, trying to completely discredit you. If she manages to make this accusation stick, it could affect the judge's perception of your ability to care for the children. Robert ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of that new accusation. What do we do now? First, we will ask the judge to disregard these allegations until they can be properly investigated, separately from the custody process. Second, we will present counter-evidence, your clean record, testimonies from people who lived with you, records of your travels on the dates she claims to have suffered aggressions. And third, I'm going to ask for a forensic analysis of the metadata of these photos. I have a hunch they may have been manipulated. In the following days, while the legal team worked to dismantle the new accusations, Robert kept the children's routine intact, shielding them from any mention of the controversies. But at night, when the children slept, he allowed himself to feel the weight of that battle. On one particularly difficult night, after a day when Beatrice had a crying fit after seeing a photo of her mother in a magazine, Robert sat on the veranda with a glass of wine, contemplating the lights of the countryside town in the distance. "Are you thinking about her?" Julia Campbell's voice, the new nanny hired after rigorous selection, interrupted his thoughts. Julia was a 40-year-old woman, experienced, with a degree in pedagogy and a specialization in early childhood education. Since her arrival 3 months ago, she had won the twins' trust and become a fundamental support for Robert. "Garth, thinking about all of this," he replied, indicating the bench beside him. "Sometimes I wonder if it will ever end, if the children will ever have peace." Julia sat down, adjusting her shawl over her shoulders to protect herself from the cold countryside wind. "Do you know what Beatrice told me today? That when she grows up, she wants to be a psychologist to help sad children like she used to be." Robert smiled, surprised. "She said that?" "Yes. These children are stronger than they seem, Robert. They are healing." Julia looked at the house, where the twins slept. "Perhaps faster than you." Those words touched something deep in Robert. He had been so focused on the legal battle, on protecting his children, that he hadn't fully processed his own pain, his own sense of betrayal and guilt. "How did I not notice what was happening?" he murmured, more to himself than to Julia. "How could I have been so blind? You're not the first father to go through this, and unfortunately you won't be the last." Julia spoke with the wisdom of someone who had seen similar situations. People like Lucy are masters at creating facades, at manipulating perceptions. And you trusted her as you should have. After all, she was the mother of your children. That night, after Julia had retired, Robert remained on the veranda for hours, reflecting on the path that had brought them there. For the first time, he allowed himself to fully feel the anger, the sadness, the sense of betrayal. He cried, silently, for the lost time, for the suffering he could not have prevented. And then, gradually, he felt something beyond the pain, an even stronger resolve to transform that experience into something that could help other families, other children. The next morning, with renewed clarity, Robert called Charles. "I want to accelerate the creation of the foundation. We can't wait for the end of the process." "Are you sure? This will attract more media attention to the case." "I am, but we'll do it differently from what we initially planned. No interviews, no personal appearances. I want to create a structure that operates independently of me, with qualified professionals at the helm. My role will only be to finance and direct resources." Charles agreed, and in the following weeks, they worked discreetly with a team of specialists to structure the New Paths Foundation, an organization dedicated to identifying, preventing, and combating child neglect in all its forms, with a special focus on cases where abuse was hidden behind privileges and appearances. Meanwhile, the technical analysis of the photos presented by Lucy confirmed what Charles had suspected. The metadata revealed digital manipulations, and a more detailed forensic analysis showed that the alleged bruises had been created with professional makeup. The secretary who had testified in favor of Lucy, when confronted with this evidence, retracted her statement, admitting to having been pressured to lie. These developments significantly strengthened Robert's case. At the subsequent hearing, Judge Claudia Mason expressed her displeasure with Lucy's tactics. "This court does not tolerate false accusations and procedural manipulations," she declared, severely. "Evidence of deliberate tampering with evidence will be forwarded to the Crown Prosecution Service for possible criminal investigation. As for the custody process, I maintain the previous decision. The minors, Matthew and Beatrice Alden, will remain under the provisional custody of their father, with supervised visits from the mother until the conclusion of the complete psychosocial report." Lucy, who had appeared at the hearing with a discreet look and a dejected air, a clear change in strategy after the failure of her previous combative stance, merely nodded silently. Her lawyers, realizing the deterioration of the case, began to suggest a settlement. "She's willing to give up shared custody," Charles informed Robert after a preliminary meeting. "In return, she wants regular unsupervised visits and the guarantee that you won't criminally prosecute her for the falsified documents." Robert shook his head, unyielding. "I cannot accept unsupervised visits. I don't trust her near the children. And as for not criminalizing her, I need to think. It's not about revenge. It's about protection." The conversation was interrupted by Robert's phone. It was Dr. Raymond, the psychologist, with worrying news. "Robert, we had a difficult session today. Matthew finally talked about something he had been holding back. It seems that during the last supervised visits, Lucy has been whispering disturbing things to the children, veiled threats, emotional manipulations. The supervisor couldn't hear because Lucy is very discreet, but it had a clear impact on the children." Robert felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of things?" "According to Matthew, phrases like, 'You'll come back to me,' 'Your father won't be able to stop it,' and 'If you tell anyone about our conversations, you'll never see me again,'" Beatrice confirmed, adding that her mother said she's getting sick with sadness and that it's their fault for not fighting to come home. Robert closed his eyes, feeling a wave of nausea. How could Lucy use her own children's fragile love as a weapon? "What do you suggest, Doctor?" "I will document everything and forward it to the judge. I suggest suspending the visits temporarily until Lucy accepts stricter conditions, including audio recording during the meetings." After hanging up, Robert shared the information with Charles, who immediately prepared an emergency petition. The judge, alarmed by the psychologist's report, suspended the visits and called a new hearing specifically to address the matter. This time, Lucy couldn't maintain her composure. Faced with the accusations, she exploded in court. "It's a lie. The children are being manipulated by their father and this charlatan psychologist," she screamed, ignoring the judge's warnings. "They're stopping me from seeing my own children. This is psychological torture." "Mrs. Alden, control yourself or you will be removed," the judge warned once again. "The children were heard separately and their accounts are consistent. Furthermore, we have the opinion of 2 independent specialists recommending the temporary suspension of visits." "Independent?" Lucy laughed bitterly. "All bought by Robert's money. all part of this conspiracy to destroy me. When the court security approached to escort her out, Lucy grabbed the table, resisting. You don't understand. He's doing this because he knows I'll expose his dirty business, the illegal contracts, the bribes he paid to get tenders. Robert paled. Those accusations were completely fabricated, but they showed how far Lucy was willing to go. Charles, sensing the danger, quickly intervened. Your Honor, these unfounded allegations are just another desperate attempt to divert attention from the children's well-being. My client has an unblemished reputation in the market, and his companies are regularly audited by international firms. The judge agreed, ordering that the unfounded accusations be removed from the record. Lucy was removed from the court, still shouting threats and accusations. The scene, witnessed by staff and others present, soon reached the press, destroying any public sympathy that still remained for the wronged mother. In the following weeks, the case took a decisive turn. The complete psychological reports were finalized, and the conclusions were devastating for Lucy. The multidisciplinary team appointed by the court identified patterns consistent with narcissistic personality disorder and emotionally abusive behavior. The children, on the other hand, showed significant progress in their current environment, with Robert and the support team he had assembled. The report recommends maintaining custody with you and continuing therapy for the children, Charles explained to Robert after receiving the document. As for Lucy, it recommends that she undergo intensive psychological treatment before any resumption of visits, even supervised ones. Robert nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. It wasn't the outcome he had imagined for his family, but it was necessary to protect Matthew and Beatrice. So as to what happens now, the judge has scheduled the final hearing for next month. Considering all the evidence and reports, it is almost certain that you will retain definitive custody. Lucy will probably have the right to supervised visits, but only after proving adherence to the recommended treatment. As the date of the final hearing approached, Lucy seemed to have finally realized the gravity of her situation. Her lawyers approached Charles proposing a more reasonable agreement. She accepts sole custody with you and supervised visits, Charles reported. But she asked for two things. First, that the visits take place in a neutral environment, not at your home. Second, that there be no negative publicity about her related to the case to protect her professional image. Robert considered the proposal for a few days, consulting Dr. Raymond about the impact on the children. Finally, he decided, I accept with additional conditions. Visits will only begin after 3 months of proven treatment, will be fully recorded, and any attempt at emotional manipulation will result in immediate suspension. As for publicity, I agree not to make public statements, provided she does the same. The agreement was formalized and approved by Judge Claudia Mason, officially closing the custody process. Robert now had exclusive legal responsibility for Matthew and Beatrice, with Lucy limited to fortnightly supervised visits after the mandatory treatment period. That night, as the children slept peacefully in their Windsor home, now their permanent residence, Robert sat on the veranda again, this time accompanied by Charles, Paul, and Julia, the people who had been instrumental in that journey. Sometimes I still wonder how I didn't notice before, Robert confessed. Looking at the stars that shone brightly in the countryside sky, all the signs were there. It's easy to look back and see the obvious, Paul replied. But when we're in the middle of the situation, especially with someone as skilled at manipulation as Lucy, the truth becomes obscured. The important thing is that you acted when you noticed, Julia added. Many wouldn't have your courage. I know cases where parents prefer to ignore, pretend everything is fine, so as not to disturb the status quo. Charles raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, for you and for the children. The others followed suit, and Robert felt a wave of gratitude for those people who had been his safe harbor during the storm. The fight wasn't completely over. There were still the twins, emotional recovery process, the establishment of the new routine, the inevitable challenges of raising 2 children alone. But the worst was over. Oh, I almost forgot to say, Charles commented before leaving. The New Paths Foundation received final approvals. It can officially start operating next month. Robert smiled, satisfied. The foundation represented his attempt to extract something positive from that painful experience. With the support of specialists in child psychology, social assistance, and family law, the Institute would work to identify similar cases, offer support to affected children and families, and raise society's awareness of forms of abuse often ignored. When the guests had left, Robert did what had become a ritual. He checked every corner of the house, making sure everything was safe, that the twins slept peacefully, that Tobias stood guard at the foot of Matthew's bed. Those small gestures of protection were now a part of him, perhaps forever. Before going to sleep, he stopped in his children's room, observing their serene faces in the dim light. Beatrice had overcome her nightmares, and Matthew no longer hid food in his pockets. Slowly, day by day, they were becoming just children again, playing, occasionally fighting, making a mess, discovering the world. The childhood that had almost been stolen from them was being rebuilt, piece by piece. "Good night, my little ones," Robert whispered, feeling his eyes well up. "Daddy's here. Always will be." 6 months had passed since the finalization of the custody process. Life in Windsor had found its own rhythm, different from the constant hustle of London, but full of small joys and moments of growth. Robert had adapted his work routine to be more present, delegating responsibilities and managing many projects remotely. The twins, now 8 years old, flourished in their new environment. The New Paths Foundation quickly gained recognition, filling an important gap in the child protection system. With a discreet but efficient approach, it had already identified dozens of cases similar to Matthew and Beatrice's, children from affluent families suffering from veiled emotional and psychological neglect, hidden behind facades of social perfection. Robert remained in the background, funding and directing the organization without seeking the spotlight, while a team of dedicated professionals carried out the daily work. On a sunny Saturday morning, while preparing breakfast with his children, a tradition they had established on weekends, Robert received a call from Charles. "Good morning, Robert. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "We're making pancakes," Robert smiled as he watched Beatrice try to flip a particularly large pancake, her tongue between her teeth in concentration. "Any problems?" "Not exactly a problem, but I thought you should know. Lucy has completed her 3 months of psychological treatment and requested the start of supervised visits, as stipulated in the agreement." Robert felt a tightening in his chest. He knew this moment would come, but part of him hoped Lucy would give up, move on with her life, and leave the twins in peace. "Are the treatment reports positive?" According to the therapist appointed by the court, she has shown significant progress in recognizing harmful behavioral patterns. Charles paused. "But honestly, Robert, we know how skilled Lucy is at presenting what people want to see. And now, the first visit is scheduled for next Saturday at the court's Family Contact Center. 2 hours chased with full professional supervision and audio and video recording." Robert looked at his children, absorbed in their culinary task, oblivious to the conversation that could deeply impact their lives. "Have you spoken to Dr. Raymond about how to prepare the children?" "I spoke to him yesterday. He suggested a special session on Wednesday with the 3 of you to discuss the matter. He emphasized the importance of being honest but reassuring." After hanging up, Robert continued the morning with his children, determined not to let the news affect that moment of shared joy. Later, when they were in the garden, he took a calm moment to carefully approach the subject. "Matthew, Beatrice, I have something important to talk to you about." The children, who were playing with Tobias, approached, sitting on the lawn beside their father. "Is it something bad?" Beatrice asked, always direct. "No, it's not bad." Robert chose his words carefully. "Do you remember we talked about how Mummy was having treatment to learn how to deal better with her feelings?" The twins nodded, exchanging quick glances, a silent code they had developed, and that Robert now recognized as a sign of anxiety. "Well, she completed the first part of the treatment, and the judge has authorized you to see her again, if you want to." "Do we have to go?" Matthew's voice was almost inaudible. "No, son. You don't have to." Robert held the boy's hand. "But if you want to see Mummy, it will be in a special place and with other people present to ensure everything goes well." Beatrice frowned, processing the information. Is Mummy still angry with us? The question hit Robert like an arrow. Even after months of therapy, even with all the love and security he strove to provide, the children still carried that fear, that guilt that didn't belong to them. No, Princess. Mummy should never have been angry with you. What happened wasn't your fault, never was. Yeah, he hugged them both. Adults sometimes do wrong things, and Mummy did things that hurt you. She's trying to learn not to do that anymore. But regardless of anything, you are wonderful children, and nothing that happened was because you did anything wrong. That night, after putting the twins to bed, Robert had a long conversation with Julia about how to handle Lucy's reintroduction into the children's lives. They're going to need a lot of support, commented the nanny, who had become a stable and reliable figure for the family. And so will you, Robert. I'm worried about their reaction. What if it's traumatic? What if she says things that hurt them again? The supervision will be there precisely to prevent that. And Dr. Raymond will be closely monitoring them. Julia paused thoughtfully. You know, as difficult as it is, this could be an opportunity for the children to process what they experienced in a healthier way with proper support. On Wednesday, as planned, Dr. Raymond conducted a special session with Robert and the twins, using dolls and drawings to help the children express their feelings about reuniting with their mother. It's okay to have different feelings about this, the psychologist explained, as Matthew drew a dark figure in a corner of the paper. You might be curious and scared at the same time, or happy and worried. All these feelings are valid. Beatrice, who was drawing what looked like a room with several people, looked up. Who will be there with us? A person from the court who helps families. I'll be there too. And of course, your father will be waiting in an adjoining room, Dr. Raymond replied. What if Mummy wants to take us away? Matthew's concern was palpable. That won't happen, Matthew, Robert intervened, keeping his voice calm despite the lump in his throat. There are very clear rules about this meeting, and taking you away is not allowed. Besides, I'll be nearby the whole time. When Saturday arrived, Robert woke before dawn, after a restless night's sleep. He prepared a special breakfast for the twins, trying to maintain a normal atmosphere despite the anxiety he felt. The children were quiet, but they didn't show the fear he dreaded. There was more of a cautious curiosity, especially in Beatrice. The Family Contact Center was located in a quiet building in Windsor Town Center, designed specifically for supervised meetings. It had welcoming rooms, decorated like home environments, but equipped with discreet monitoring systems. The assigned supervisor, Dr. Marianne Carter, was an experienced social worker specializing in parental alienation and child trauma. We're going to establish some basic rules, she explained, while Robert signed the necessary forms. Mrs. Lucy has already been informed that any attempt to discuss the judicial process, make accusations against you, or bring up topics that might cause discomfort to the children will result in the immediate termination of the visit. Robert nodded, still tense. What if the children want to stop before the scheduled time? They can request it at any time, and we will respect that immediately. Dr. Marianne smiled gently. Mr. Alden, I understand your concern, but we are here precisely to ensure it is a safe experience for Matthew and Beatrice. As the twins were led to the visiting room, Robert settled into the waiting room, where he could watch the meeting through a monitor, unseen. Charles had insisted on this condition, so he could intervene quickly if necessary. When Lucy entered the visiting room, Robert felt a mix of contradictory emotions. She was different, simpler, without the exaggerated presentation she usually flaunted. Her face, once always perfectly made up, now showed subtle signs of tiredness and perhaps regret. Upon seeing her children, she hesitated visibly, as if unsure how to act. The twins also seemed momentarily paralyzed, until Beatrice, always the bolder one, took a step forward. "Hi, Mummy." "Hi, my darling." Lucy's voice trembled slightly. "You're so grown up." The meeting proceeded with caution from both sides. Lucy asked about school, about friends, about what they liked to do. The children answered politely, but without the enthusiasm they showed at home. There was an invisible barrier, built by fear and memory, that none of them seemed to know how to cross. At one point, Matthew mentioned the dog Tobias, and Lucy seemed genuinely interested. A dog? How nice. What breed is he? Aunt Julia said he's a special mixed breed. Matthew smiled for the first time. He sleeps in my room and protects me from nightmares. A flash of something, pain, regret, crossed Lucy's face. You had many nightmares. Matthew shrugged, suddenly withdrawn. Dr. Marianne, noticing the change, subtly intervened. Matthew, why don't you tell your mum about the drawing you did at school? The one that won an award. The boy brightened again, and the conversation returned to safer waters. At the end of the 2 hours, when Dr. Marianne gently announced that time was up, Lucy seemed to want to say something deeper, but held back. It was good to see you, she said, with an emotion Robert couldn't fully decipher. I hope we can see each other again soon. Beatrice, in an impulse that surprised everyone, approached and gave her mother a quick hug. Matthew remained where he was, only waving shyly. On the way back home, Robert waited for the twins to speak first, giving them space to process the experience. Mummy seemed sad, Beatrice commented finally, as she watched the landscape through the car window. You thought so? Robert asked, carefully. Yes. And different. Before, she was always dressed up and talking loudly. Today, she was normal. Matthew, who had been quiet, added, She wasn't angry once. Robert nodded, recognizing the importance of this observation. For children accustomed to Lucy's emotional unpredictability, an encounter without angry outbursts was significant. How did you feel seeing Mummy? The twins exchanged glances, in their usual silent communication. It was strange, Beatrice replied, finally. But not as scary as I thought. Can we have ice cream now? Matthew's question signaled that, for now, he had processed enough and wanted to return to normality. Of course, champion. In the following weeks, visits continued fortnightly, always under careful supervision. Dr. Raymond monitored the children's reactions, observing how their relationship with their mother slowly evolved. To Robert's surprise, Lucy seemed genuinely committed to rebuilding a healthy relationship with her children, respecting the imposed boundaries and showing a patience she had never exhibited before. Is it possible that the treatment is really working? Robert asked Dr. Raymond after the 4th visit. It is possible, yes. The psychologist adjusted his glasses, thoughtfully. People with narcissistic traits rarely change completely, but they can learn to control harmful behaviors, especially when there's strong enough motivation. And do you think she's genuinely motivated? Hard to say for sure, but the fact is, regardless of her internal motivations, her external behavior has been appropriate, and that's what matters to the children right now. Charles, always more skeptical, had a different view. Stay vigilant, Robert. People like Lucy don't change overnight. She might be playing the long game, building an image of a reformed mother to eventually request a custody review. Robert wavered between cautious hope and distrust, but kept his focus on his children's well-being. They were what mattered, and for now, the visits seemed to be having a positive effect, helping them process their complex feelings towards their mother in a safe and controlled environment. Meanwhile, life in Windsor continued its course. Robert had found a balance between work, now more focused on the foundation, and family life. Julia continued to be a fundamental pillar, a constant and reliable presence for the twins. And little by little, new people began to enter their lives. Marianne, the supervisor at the Family Contact Center, had become a family friend, occasionally joining them for Sunday lunches or afternoons in the local park. Her professional experience brought a valuable perspective, and her warm personality quickly won over the twins. It's impressive how much they've progressed, she commented on one of those afternoons, watching Matthew and Beatrice happily playing with other children in the municipal park. I remember the first day at the center, how cautious they were, measuring every word. Now, look at them. Robert followed her gaze, smiling as he watched Beatrice lead a group of children in some complicated game she had probably just invented, while Matthew built elaborate sand structures with 2 new friends. Sometimes I still find myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know, he confessed, as if all this were temporary, as if at any moment something could happen and take them back to that state of constant fear. Marianne nodded, understanding. It's natural. Trauma doesn't just affect children, Robert. It affects the whole family. You also went through a traumatic process, discovering what was happening, fighting to protect them, rebuilding everything from scratch. I don't think I ever thought of it that way. I was so focused on them. And you continue to be an incredible father, Marianne smiled. But remember that to take good care of them, you also need to take care of yourself. That conversation stayed in Robert's mind in the following days, making him reflect on his own healing process. He had delved so deeply into the mission of protecting and recovering his children that he had barely had time to process his own emotions. The betrayal, the guilt, the anger, the grief for the end of his marriage, and the loss of the family he had imagined having. In a private session with Dr. Raymond, something he had recently started at Charles's insistence, Robert explored these feelings. You know what torments me most? The possibility that, on some level, I always knew something was wrong, but I chose to ignore it. What do you mean? The psychologist asked. Attentive. Small things. The way the children would fall silent when Lucy entered a room. How she always insisted on taking care of certain routines alone, especially feeding. The fact that every time I came back from a trip, the twins seemed different, thinner, quieter. I attributed it to normal growth or missing me, but, Robert, self-deception is a powerful defense mechanism, especially when the truth is so painful and implies difficult actions. But my job was to protect them, as a father, and that's exactly what you did, the moment you clearly realized what was happening. Dr. Raymond leaned forward slightly. Retrospective guilt is rarely productive. The more important question now is, how do you transform this experience into growth for you and for the children? It was a question Robert had been trying to answer through the New Paths Foundation. The organization grew rapidly, becoming a national reference in the prevention and combat of child neglect. In addition to direct work with identified cases, the foundation developed educational programs for health professionals, educators, and legal operators, helping them recognize subtle signs of abuse in contexts where the appearance of normality or privilege could mask serious problems. In parallel, Robert started a personal project. He wrote a book under a pseudonym recounting his experience, not as an exposé or revenge, but as a way to alert other parents and to process his own journey. The writing, which began as therapy suggested by Dr. Raymond, had become a purpose. Beyond appearances, Marianne read, when Robert showed her the preliminary manuscript during one of the Sunday lunches that had become a tradition. It's a good title. Do you think it can help other people? He asked, insecure about the project. I'm sure it will. She carefully leafed through the pages. Do you know how many cases like yours remain invisible because people don't know what to look for? How many fathers and mothers feel isolated, questioning their own sanity when they realize something is wrong? The book would be published the following year, with part of the profits going to the foundation, but the most important impact would be intangible, helping other families recognize signs that Robert wished he had identified earlier. As time passed and the routine stabilized, Robert began to notice subtle changes in himself. The constant anxiety that had accompanied him in the first months after the separation began to give way to a quiet confidence. The obsessive checking of the house before bed became less frequent. The nightmares about losing his children, which had for so long disturbed his sleep, had virtually disappeared. One day, while watching the twins playing in the garden with Tobias, Robert realized he was smiling, not the tense smile of difficult times, but a genuine smile, born of the simple joy of seeing his children happy and safe. Matthew, once so withdrawn, now laughed openly as he ran with the dog. Beatrice, who for so long had measured every word carefully, spoke animatedly about her plans to build a tree house. They're really doing well, aren't they? Marianne's voice, who had arrived for Sunday lunch, interrupted his thoughts. Robert turned to her, noticing how the sunlight highlighted the golden tones in her brown hair. They are. Finally, they are. And you? She smiled, and her eyes meeting his. How is Robert Holden? Learning to live again, one day at a time. He returned the smile, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. and discovering that there's life beyond the storm. At that moment, as they walked together to call the children for lunch, Robert understood that they had all survived something that could have destroyed them. More than that, they had emerged stronger, more connected, more aware of the value of genuine love and true care. The journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges. There would still be difficult days. There would still be the complex relationship with Lucy to manage for years to come. But now, he faced the future without fear, strengthened by the certainty that he had made the right choice when he decided to look beyond appearances and protect what truly mattered. And as they sat at the table for lunch, with Matthew animatedly talking about his new science project, Beatrice debating whether the treehouse should have 1 or 2 floors, Marianne contributing practical suggestions, and Tobias hopefully observing everything from the kitchen door, Robert knew they had found something precious, not the perfect family he once imagined having, but a real family, built on foundations of truth, respect, and unconditional love. "Dad, can we have dessert today?" Matthew asked, after completely clearing his plate, a habit that remained, even without the old food insecurity. "Of course, son," Robert smiled, serving generous portions of pudding to everyone. "Today is a day to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" Beatrice questioned, curious. Robert thought for a moment, looking at the people gathered at his table. "Life, Princess. We are celebrating the life and love we have built together, day after day." And as the twins exchanged glances, confused but satisfied with the explanation, Marianne discreetly touched Robert's hand under the table, a simple gesture that said everything words could not express in that perfect moment. This was how healing happened, Robert realized, not in grand dramatic moments, but in these small instances of genuine connection, of shared joy, of security found in the arms of those we love, a dessert pudding, a sincere laugh, a gentle touch, a family rebuilt, stronger after the storm. 1.5 years after the conclusion of the custody process, the Alden family's life had found a new and healthy balance. The twins, nearing their 9th birthday, were vibrant, creative, and emotionally secure children, having overcome much of their past traumas thanks to the stable and loving environment Robert had managed to create for them. The relationship with Lucy, though never simple, had evolved into a state of functional civility. Supervised visits had progressed to more natural encounters, still monitored, but with greater flexibility. To everyone's surprise, especially Charles, who maintained his professional skepticism, Lucy showed consistent commitment to her therapy and rigorously followed all conditions set by the court. On a Saturday afternoon, after one of these visits, Robert was waiting in the cafe near the contact center when Lucy approached his table, something she had never done before, as they usually waited for the children in separate locations. "Can I sit for a minute?" she asked, with an unusual hesitation in her posture. Robert nodded, surprised. "Of course." She sat down, nervously adjusting her handbag strap. "The children went to the restroom, so I thought we could talk a bit." She took a deep breath. "Robert, I know we'll never be friends, and I'm not asking for that, but I wanted you to know that I am genuinely trying to change." Robert studied his ex-wife's face, looking for signs of the old manipulation, but found only tiredness and something that resembled sincerity. "I'm happy to hear that, Lucy, for our children's sake. My therapist." She hesitated again, as if the words were difficult to form. "Here she helped me understand things about myself that I had never realized, patterns that come from my own childhood, from the way I was raised. I'm not using that as an excuse for what I did, but I understand." And in some ways, Robert truly understood. Over the past few years, through his work at the foundation, he had learned much about intergenerational cycles of abuse and neglect, about how toxic behaviors often had deep roots in the past. "I just wanted to say that I know I can never undo the harm I caused." Lucy's voice trembled slightly. "But I am committed to being, from now on, a mother they can respect, even if it's only for a few hours a month." Before Robert could respond, the twins returned, and the moment passed. But that brief conversation remained in his mind in the following days, making him reflect on forgiveness, redemption, and the human capacity for change. In one of his sessions with Dr. Raymond, Robert shared the episode. Part of me wants to believe her. For the twins, mainly. It would be so much easier for them if they could have a genuinely healthy relationship with their mother. And the other part? The other part remembers everything we went through. The fear in my children's eyes. The sleepless nights. Imagining what could have happened if I hadn't found out in time. The psychologist nodded. Understanding. You know, Robert, forgiveness is not a single event but a process, and it doesn't mean forgetting or minimizing what happened. It essentially means choosing not to let anger and resentment continue to control your emotions and decisions. So, should I forgive her? That's something only you can decide, in your own time. The important thing is that, regardless of what you choose regarding Lucy, you don't allow the past to define the future, your future and your children's. It was wise advice, resonating with the journey Robert had been on. Little by little, day by day, he learned to balance the necessary vigilance to protect his children with an openness to new possibilities, new beginnings. One of these new beginnings was developing in his relationship with Marianne. What began as a friendship based on professional circumstances had naturally evolved into something deeper. Both had been cautious, aware of the complexity of the situation and the importance of protecting the children from another potential disruptive change. But over time, it became increasingly clear that a genuine feeling was growing between them. "Do you think it's too soon?" Robert asked Charles during lunch. The lawyer, who had become a close friend, considered the question seriously. "How long has it been since the official end of your marriage? Almost 2 years." "Yes, but the children." "The children adore Marianne, from what you tell me, and she's been a part of your routine for over a year." Charles took a sip of water. Besides, she understands the situation better than anyone, given her work. "If there's anyone prepared to enter your lives without causing harm, it's her." Robert nodded. Thoughtfully, in recent weeks, Marianne had been even more present, participating in family dinners, weekend outings, even helping the twins with school projects. The four formed a natural, comfortable unit, without the tensions or insecurities Robert feared. "Perhaps it's time to make things official," he finally concluded. "Talk openly with the twins, see how they feel." The opportunity arose naturally on a Sunday, after a full day of activities together. They had visited a science fair at the twins' school in the morning, had lunch at a favorite restaurant, and spent the afternoon in an ecological park on the outskirts of Windsor. Back home, as the children prepared for bed, Robert decided it was time. "Matthew, Beatrice, can we talk for a little bit before story time?" The twins, already in their pajamas and with brushed teeth, sat on Beatrice's bed with curious expressions. "Is it something fun or boring?" the girl asked, direct as always. "I hope it's fun." Robert smiled, sitting in front of his children. "It's about Marianne." The twins exchanged quick glances, their usual silent communication. "What about Aunt Mary?" Matthew asked, hugging his favorite teddy bear. "Well, you've noticed she's been spending a lot of time with us, haven't you? On weekends, at lunches, on outings." Beatrice nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "Yes, so. And do you like it when she's here?" "Of course," Matthew replied, animated. "She always has the best game ideas." "And she helps me with my storybook," Beatrice added, referring to the notebook where she wrote imaginative tales that Marianne helped her review and illustrate. Robert took a deep breath, feeling surprisingly nervous. "I'm thinking of asking Marianne to be my girlfriend. What do you think about that?" There was a moment of silence as the twins processed the information. Then, to Robert's surprise, both began to laugh. "Dad, you're already dating," Beatrice exclaimed, as if it were obvious. "I saw you kiss her in the garden last week." "And she always looks at you with that funny face," Matthew added, imitating a dreamy expression that made everyone laugh. Robert felt a blush rise to his face, realizing that his children were much more observant than he imagined. "Well, yes, I suppose we are, in a way, but I wanted to officially know if you'd be happy if she became part of our family in a more permanent way." Beatrice frowned, thoughtful. "Like when people get married." "We're not thinking about marriage yet," Robert quickly clarified. "But yes, eventually, it could be something like that." Matthew, who had been quiet for a moment, raised an important question. "Will Mummy be sad?" The question caught Robert by surprise. It was the first time one of the twins had shown concern for Lucy's feelings since they had begun their recovery. "Your mother and I are no longer together, Matthew. And everyone has the right to be happy in their own way. Just as she might meet someone special one day, so can I." "But we'll still see Mummy, right?" the boy insisted. "Of course. Nothing will change about that. Your meetings with her will continue exactly as they are." Beatrice, always practical, wanted to know, "Will Aunt Marie live here with us?" "Not yet. We'll start slowly, as we have been. She'll continue to come on weekends, maybe spend some nights here occasionally. And we'll see how things naturally evolve." The twins seemed satisfied with the answers. Beatrice, especially, seemed enthusiastic about the prospect. "I like Aunt Marie," she declared decisively. "She never shouts and always listens when I have something important to say. And she makes the best fudge in the world," Matthew added, for whom cooking continued to be an important point of trust and security. Robert smiled, feeling immense relief. He had worried so much about his children's reaction, fearing they would see Marianne's presence as a threat or a disturbing change. Instead, they had already naturally integrated her into their concept of family. "So it's decided. I'll talk to her tomorrow." "She'll say yes, Dad," Beatrice asserted, with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "She already loves you. You can see it in her eyes." The next day, after dropping the twins off at school, Robert met Marianne for morning coffee, a habit they had developed on Mondays. The small cafe in Windsor's historic district, with its wrought-iron tables and tranquil atmosphere, had become their special place. "You seem nervous today," Marianne observed, stirring her cappuccino. "Did something happen?" Robert smiled, admiring how she always managed to read his emotions. "I talked to the children last night. About us." Marianne raised her eyebrows, surprised. "Really? And how did it go?" "Better than I could have imagined." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "In fact, they thought we were already officially dating. Beatrice even told me she saw us kiss in the garden last week." Marianne laughed, blushing slightly. "I told you we needed to be more discreet. Those children don't miss a thing." "Apparently not." Robert hesitated for a moment, then decided to be direct. "Mari, I know our situation isn't the most conventional. I have 2 children who are recovering from significant trauma, a complex ex-wife, and a whole life rebuilt from scratch. It's not what most people would look for in a relationship." "Robert," she gently interrupted, "if I wanted most people, I wouldn't be here. I'm here because I fell in love with you, with the man who risked everything to protect his children, with the father who rebuilt an entire life focused on their well-being, with the man who, even after everything he's been through, still has the capacity to love, to trust, to open himself to new possibilities." She squeezed his hand in hers, and I fell in love with those children too, with Matthew and his quiet way of observing everything, his rare but sincere laugh, with Beatrice and her inexhaustible energy, her limitless creativity, with Tobias and his way of protecting all of you as if it were his life's mission. She smiled. "You are a complete package, Robert. And it's exactly that package that I want." Robert felt something expand in his chest, a feeling of fullness, of possibilities, of future. "So, officially, will you be my girlfriend?" Marianne laughed at the formality of the question. "I thought you'd never ask. Yes, Mr. Alden, I officially accept to be your girlfriend." In the following months, life continued to evolve at its own pace. Marianne integrated more and more into the family routine, now officially as Robert's partner and a loving presence in the twins' lives. Lucy's visits proceeded without incident, and to everyone's relief, she received the news of Robert's relationship with surprising maturity, limiting herself to asking that Marianne not replace her role as a mother, a comprehensible concern that everyone strived to respect. The New Paths Foundation grew and expanded its reach. What began as a local initiative in Windsor now had branches in 3 counties, offering support to families, training to professionals, and raising awareness about subtle forms of child abuse. Robert divided his time between managing his original businesses, now largely delegated to trusted executives, and working at the foundation, which had become his true professional passion. The book, Beyond Appearances, published under the pseudonym Richard Morris, became an unexpected success, especially among child protection professionals and families who identified similar patterns in their own experiences. The story, narrated with sensitivity and without sensationalism, had helped to shed light on a reality often ignored, that child abuse can occur in any social class, hidden behind facades of privilege and perfection. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, almost 3 years after that fateful discovery at Mrs. Clara's house, Robert watched the garden of the Windsor home, now transformed into a true children's paradise. The treehouse Beatrice had so desired had been built, with professional help, but following the design elaborated by the girl herself. Matthew had his own science corner, where he conducted simple experiments under adult supervision. Tobias, now a respectable old dog, dozed in the sun, occasionally opening an eye to check if everyone was well. Marianne approached, handing Robert a cup of coffee. "What are you thinking about? You seem distant." "I'm thinking about how life comes full circle." He smiled, pulling her to sit beside him. 3 years ago, I thought I had a perfect life, a successful marriage, a brilliant career, healthy children. And then, in a matter of minutes, everything fell apart. And now I know I have something much better than perfection. He watched the twins playing animatedly with school friends who had come for lunch. I have authenticity. I have children who no longer need to pretend, who can be exactly who they are. I have you, who accepts me with all my scars and complicated stories. Marianne rested her head on his shoulder, sharing the moment of contemplation. "You know what Beatrice told me yesterday? That she wants to be a social worker when she grows up, like Aunt Mari." She smiled. "She said she wants to help other children find families who truly love them. That doesn't surprise me. She always had such a big heart." Matthew surprised me too. He's usually so reserved. But yesterday, while we were doing his science project, he started talking about how he used to feel. He said he used to think there was something wrong with him. That's why his mum acted that way. Robert felt a lump in his throat. "And what did you say?" "I told him what you always repeat, that nothing that happened was his or Beatrice's fault, that sometimes adults have problems they can't control and end up hurting those they love, that the important thing is that now he's safe and he can count on many people who love him exactly as he is." Robert nodded. Grateful for Marianne's wisdom and sensitivity with his children, they were lucky to find you. All of us were. At that moment, as if sensing they were the topic of conversation, Matthew and Beatrice ran up to them, brimming with energy and enthusiasm. "Dad, Marie! Come see what we discovered at the back of the garden!" Beatrice exclaimed, pulling Marianne's hand. "It's a type of insect we've never seen before," Matthew added, his eyes sparkling with scientific excitement. "I think it might be a rare species." Robert and Marianne exchanged knowing smiles before allowing themselves to be dragged by the children into another family adventure. And as they walked through the sunny garden, Robert thought about how sometimes you have to face the darkness to truly learn to value the light, how it is necessary to look beyond appearances to see what truly matters. Their story, of Robert, Matthew, Beatrice, and now Marianne and Tobias, was not perfect. It had scars. It had constant challenges. It had a painful past that would never be completely forgotten. But it was authentic. It was built on foundations of truth, respect, and unconditional love. And that, Robert now understood, was infinitely more valuable than any facade of perfection. As they approached the corner of the garden where the mysterious discovery awaited, Robert felt a deep peace, the kind that only comes when we know we are exactly where we should be, surrounded by exactly those we should love. The future would undoubtedly bring more challenges. The twins, adolescence, the evolution of his relationship with Marianne, the complex balance with Lucy, the ever-increasing demands of the foundation. But now there was an unwavering certainty. Together, as a family, they would face each new stage with the strength that comes from truth, from restored trust, and from love that transcends appearances and overcomes the deepest wounds. Dear listeners, we hope Robert and his children's story has touched your hearts. To follow other equally moving narratives that explore the complexities of family relationships, We have prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking on the left. If this journey of overcoming and family reconstruction has stirred something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we share stories that celebrate human resilience and the ability to rebuild life even after the most difficult trials. From which city are you joining us? Tell us in the comments and be part of this community that is moved and strengthened by real stories of overcoming. Until next time.